Hey, May 2025 IB Business Management students, I hope you're doing well. We know some of you may be anxious with only less than 2 months left until the start of your IB exam and how to best prepare yourself as you begin your study leave soon. With your Business Management Paper 1 exam coming up on April 30th, we made this video here at Diplomaly to support and guide you through as you prepare for your Paper 1 pre-release statement on the company Myt PLC. So let's get started. To give everyone a quick overview of what paper one is about, this is a 1 hour and 30-minute exam, which you will be writing on April 30th. This exam will be written by both HL and SL students. In other words, this means that as an HL student, you can expect that only the SL content will be tested. Okay, so only SL content. And this can give you a bit more focus on the content you should be studying. Now, the pre-release statement might make reference to some HL related content, and you might think you will get some HL related question, but the IB syllabus is very clear on this aspect that in paper one, this is a common paper for HL and SL student. Okay, so common paper for HL and SL students. Okay. And so therefore, as an HL student, you do not need to apply any of the HL content you have learned in the course in this paper one examination. But of course, if you do include it, you won't be penalized for it as long as you have used it appropriately and correctly, given the case study information in Myt PLC, because the IB applies something called positive marking when they mark your exam. So ultimately, there's no need and also no expectations for you as an HL student to include any of the HL content here. Also, another thing to note is that even though this exam is only 1 hour and 30 minutes, the IB has made an important change in how they will run the exams that are less than 2 hours, this year for you as a May 2025 candidate. So according to the IB's Conduct of Examination booklet, starting from the previous exam session, which was in November 2024 onwards, all of the exams with a duration of less than 2 hours, the candidates will need to remain supervised until the 2 hours have passed by the IB exam invigilator and also the DP coordinator at your school. So in other words, given that this paper one is less than 1 hour and 30 minutes, you will be required to stay in the exam room or the exam hall, wherever your DP coordinator is arranging for you to write the paper one exam within that room or within that exam hall until the 2 hour has elapsed. So then you can then leave the examination hall. So one top tip that I would really share with you as a May 2025 candidate is that for that 30 minutes after you're done with the exam, because it's 1 hour and 30 minutes, right? Um, so the 30 minutes until the 2 hour mark where you are allowed to be released from the exam hall or the exam room, you will probably want to use those 30 minutes to start studying a little bit or recapping on some materials in preparation for the paper three examination for those higher level students who will be writing paper three immediately after paper one. Now, it is very likely that your DP coordinator will not allow you to have any access to your mobile phones, the computer, or even your iPad if that's something that you use to study off with. So I would strongly recommend you to print off any hard copy notes that you have and just bring those with you. So then during that 30 minutes, if your DP coordinator or the exam invigilators allow you to have access to your notes to study for the 30 minutes, you may do so during that time. But if everything is in your computer or if everything is, on your iPad and you're not allowed, access to these technological devices during those 30 minutes until the 2 hour has elapsed, then you'll be just pretty much sitting there for 30 minutes until the start of the, paper three examination. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, if you want to rest a bit and just have your, brain, give your brain a little bit of a break before you start paper three. But that's something to think about if those of you who are keen on doing a little bit more revision during that 30 minutes. So that's a new thing that they've put in for the May 2025 examination. And it's going to continue onwards for all of the remaining exams after, November 2024. So the reason why behind this, you might know, it's really to prevent the issue of what happened last year during the May 2024 examination and also to protect the integrity of the IB examination so there's no cheating across the time zones. In terms of the weighting for the exam, you can see from our table right here, the standard level course, paper one is worth 35%, and for the higher level students, paper one is worth 25%, slightly less for the higher level students because you will also need to write your paper three on the same day on April 30th, which will occur immediately after your paper three examination. Sorry, paper one examination rather. You might notice that under the instruction section for paper one, you are told that the IB formula sheet will not be provided, okay, for paper one examination. However, you are allowed the GDC, okay? So you are allowed access to the GDC or a scientific calculator. Now, this is a very important note for you to remember as you're preparing for the paper one examination, because it means that you are expected to perform some basic, simple mathematical calculation. Okay, so you have to perform some basic quantitative calculations. Now, you might ask, well, if you don't have the formula sheet, then what kind of calculations can they test you? So some of the examples, which you've done in your course within business management, which requires you to use certain formula or have a good understanding of simple business type of formula, but they're not on the formula sheet. These include things such as calculating total costs, calculating total fixed costs, total variable costs, calculating revenue, performing profit calculation, doing break-even calculation, doing contribution calculations, or even applying quantitative BMTs, such as the decision tree or even cash flow forecast. These are some simple calculations that you can expect, which are not in the formula sheet, but they are things that you can be expected, or you might be presented with these data and financial information in your paper one examination. Now, while all of these topics are quantitative in nature, these are also topics that they have formula, which you pretty much need to know how to use, as they are not in the formula sheet in any way. Okay, so just make sure that you familiarize yourself with these types of calculations and make sure that you're able to perform those calculations if you're presented with the data, the financial information on the day of the exam, and you'll know what you need to do. Now, similarly for topics which have formula that are in the formula sheet, so things such as the investment appraisal methods like payback period, ARR, ratio analysis, it's unlikely that you will be expected to calculate them, but that doesn't rule out the possibility that the IB could present you, let's say, with a table, and then they'll give you the already calculated profitability or liquidity ratios, or they might have presented you with a table with, let's say, the payback period calculated and also the ARR calculated, for example. So in this respect, what you can be expected to do is you might be expected to interpret and analyze, for example, these ratio results, or let's say the investment appraisal results, given the case study information. So just again, keep in mind that although this paper is largely quantitative, okay, it is a largely qualitative paper, but it doesn't rule out that there could be some, simple mathematical calculation that you can expect for paper one. And, overall, the paper one will be largely qualitative in nature, but do expect that there can be some quantitative questions in the exam. So hopefully this narrows down a bit more on the topics that you will need to study. And as IB students, we know that you will study hard for your final exam. And at Diplomaly, our aim is really to support and equip our students with the strategies to study smart, so then you can get the most out of this course. And of course, to help you maximize your chances of success in getting a level 6 or level 7 in this IB subject. All right, so let's break down paper one a little bit more by taking a look at the two sections that you will be presented on the day of the exam. So you will have two sections for paper one, a section A and a section B. Again, it's a common paper, so these questions will be exactly the same for both HL and SL students. In section A, this is worth 20 marks, and in this section, you are required to answer all of the questions that are presented in section A. Section A will consist of primarily qualitative question, but with the potential of perhaps maybe one or two quantitative question, depending on what is the information that you're given on the day of the exam. Now, with the pre-release statement that you're given for May 2025 on Myt PLC, so far you've gotten approximately 200 words of the case study. On the day of the exam, you will get the remaining 800 words. So it really depends on what you're given on the day of the exam. Those of you who already have a copy of Myt PLC from your teachers at school, you notice that the first 200 words doesn't really comprise of a lot of quantitative information. Okay. But again, we cannot rule out that there is a possibility you might be asked to perform some simple basic mathematical calculations, which doesn't require you to use a formula sheet. Okay, which is why on paper one, the instruction on the cover page of the examination, it says that you are allowed access to a GDC or an IB approved scientific calculator. Now, taking note that section A is primarily qualitative, it means that you could get questions ranging from, for example, a definition question, which might be worth 2 marks. So things like, for example, define the term internal growth. Okay. You might get a 4 marker question, okay, where you might be asked to explain one advantage and one disadvantage of something in relation to the case study. And then you have a 6 marker question, okay, which is a bit of an extension to the 4 marker question. Pretty much the structure is going to be very similar, but obviously your response will have to be a bit longer. And then the one key difference with the 6 marker question is there is an expectation that you do have to apply some tools, okay, so BM tools and theories as part of your explanation for this response, okay? But please remember that for the 6 marker question, you do not need to give any conclusion. A lot of students in the past that we've worked with, they come to us and then they will write 6 marker responses with a conclusion. That would be inaccurate, and that would be also a pretty much a waste of time in the exam because you're not expected to do that for the 6 marker question. You only need to do the conclusion for the 10 marker essay, okay, which will appear in the next section in section B, and I'll talk about that in a second. And just to finish off with section A, just remember that only SL content will be tested. So there is absolutely no HL content. So this would provide a bit of a relief for the HL students as you're thinking about the types of question you can expect for a Myt PLC. Just make sure that you are just focusing more on the SL content. Okay, but again, as an HL student, even if let's say you accidentally written something that is HL related in your response, as long as what you've written and the content you've applied from the HL course is relevant to the context of the case study and the information provided to you, then you would still be given positive marking when it comes to the grading process by the IB examiner. It's not because you wrote an HL content, they will then start docking marks off of your response. Okay, it doesn't work like that. Just as long as everything is relevant and is appropriate to the question that's being answered, okay, the examiners will apply something called positive marking. Now, looking at section B is worth 10 marks. What is different about section B compared to section A is that section B will provide you with 2 questions, but your job is to answer one of the 2 questions. So unlike section A, you've got to answer all question. Section B, you do not need to answer all questions, okay? Please don't do that. Again, I've worked with students in the past who, maybe because of anxiety in exam or maybe they misread the question, okay, whatever it may be, they ended up answering the 2 10-marker question, which from a time management perspective, not sure how that really worked for the student, but please don't do that because obviously if you spend, let's say the 30 minutes to write 2 10-marker essays, and obviously your essay is not going to have the amount of depth, okay, amount of analysis, and also the evaluation that is needed for you to score top marks for the 10-marker essay in your paper one examination. So in section B, you will get 2 questions, okay, you choose one. Okay, both of these questions will be an AO3 question, meaning that it will be a 10-marker question that assesses your ability on your knowledge and understanding of business management content knowledge, your ability to demonstrate application skill to the case study on Myt PLC, and then your ability to demonstrate analysis. So looking at 2 sides of the argument, pros and cons, arguments for and arguments against, okay? Making sure that you have a balanced approach in your response. So you're not leaning only towards the pros rather than the cons, for example. Or let's say if you're given a 10 marker, you have to make a decision between option one and option two. And then you're only talking about option one in your essay, and then you don't look at anything in relation to option two. Then that becomes an unbalanced response. And an unbalanced response will not score very well in this 10 marker essay. Of course, if you want to learn more about our 10 marker essay structure approach, feel free to visit the Diplomaly website. We do have a lot of resources from case studies to walkthrough videos to exam skills videos that will walk you through on how to tackle a successful 10 marker response in the DP Business Management exam. Okay? But within the paper one examination, you will get two of these 10 marker essays, of which you will pick one of them to write and make sure that you don't forget to apply your BMTs, okay, and also the theories as part of your response. So you're talking about looking at all of the content that you've learned across the 5 units, including the business management toolkit. All right. Now, just really to prepare all of you guys for the Myt PLC case study, on our Diplomaly website, we do have mock exams that we have already posted on our website for you to practice. Of course, your teacher will give you some practices, and also you might work through some of these Section A type of question. But on the Diplomaly website, we have now the mock exam, a full mock exam paper for Myt PLC that you can have a go at. All right, so do check that out on our website at www.diplomaly.org. So let's deep dive into this pre-release statement. This pre-release statement was shared by the IB to teachers in early February, and your teacher at school should have already given you a copy of this. The pre-release statement, which you have received, is approximately 200 words. And on April 30th, which is the day of the exam, you will get the remaining 800 words, okay, of this case study on Myt PLC. So in other words, the entire paper one case study will be approximately 1,000 words in total. Now, in terms of the number of pages for the case, if we take reference from the May and the November 2024 exam, you can expect around 2 full pages of text, excluding any diagrams, images, or tables. So in your case, for the May 2025 exam paper one on Myt PLC, I would expect the same for you. You should have annotated the pre-release statement with your teacher at school already. But if you haven't done so, don't worry, we'll take some time together now to go through this together so you have a better idea of what you should be expecting and what you should be looking for the case. So let's get to it. So as we can see, the first sentence here is an introduction on Myt PLC. It says Myt PLC is a publicly held multinational company that manufactures non-alcoholic drinks. Now, what I recommend students to do for any of these case study analysis is you might want to just make a legend for yourself. Any key BM terms, you can then highlight this in green. Okay, so you have a good idea of these are probably terms that you want to make sure you are able to define because they can show up as the AO1 definition questions. As you can see from the format for section A, you can get a 2 marker, 4 marker, and 6 marker question. So the first key term here is publicly held company, but we can also see that multinational company is also another term. So there's actually 2 different terminologies that you need to take note of. So publicly held relates to topic 1.2 on types of business entity. And multinational company relates to topic 1.6. Okay, multinational company refers to companies that operate in more than one geographical location with business operations, in many geographical countries and locations. Publicly held company is a private for-profit organization, okay? And publicly held companies usually have went through a process called the initial public offering, where it allows the businesses to sell its shares to the public. So they're not restricted to only selling shares to family and friends, in which case that is called a privately held company rather than a publicly held company. So Myt is a company that manufactures non-alcoholic drinks. So that's their line of business. So they are a manufacturer, okay, rather than someone that has multiple different outlets and retail shops selling these alcoholic drinks. So what that means is this business might they are the manufacturer, and then they would then produce these non-alcoholic drinks, which would then be sold worldwide across different countries through supply chains where they sell it to, for example, let's say intermediaries, wholesaler, retailers, and so on. So that's also something you might want to think about because they are a manufacturer. You might have to think about supply chain. So, for example, how they source materials. Okay. Is it a long supply chain or is it a long supply chain? You might also want to look at, for example, the distribution of their drinks. Okay. Because as you can see from the second and the third sentence, it says that they had head office in the US. Okay, but they manufacture and they own manufacturing facilities or factories on 6 different continents. So in other words, Myt PLC as a business, the scale of its operation is pretty big. Now the fact that they have factory plants in 6 different locations, this would then echo location analysis. So for example, looking at the decisions, okay, looking at the pros and cons in relation to um, where Myt PLC, okay, will locate their factories. Okay. And because they operate on 6 different continents, then of course you have to look at, for example, the distribution, okay, which I said earlier. And distribution is a 7P, okay, which relates to place, for example. So you might look at possible, let's say a 4-marker question could be on, the pros and cons of Myt PLC in, using long distribution channel versus a short distribution channel, for example. So you might look at long versus short distribution, okay? And its pros and cons, for example. This could be possibly an AO1, so a 2-marker, or it could be an AO2, which is a 4-marker question that you might expect. All right. Okay. So location analysis is important because that is from topic 5.4. Okay, so what I've done here is I pretty much just highlighted certain key things that you need to be on the lookout for. Of course, we're given only 200 words for this case study. There is obviously very limited information that we know, but then we try to dig deep and we try to, unpack whatever we have with this 200 words to as much detail and extent that we can think about in order to help you narrow down and focus a bit more on different topics that you want to pay more special attention to as you're preparing for your revision plan, okay, in the next month and a half. All right. So moving onwards, you'll see that in the second paragraph, it says Myt has grown in size through internal and external growth. Now, internal and external growth would be another key BM term that you want to know. This is obviously from topic 1.5 on growth and evolution. Okay, so being able to know the pros and cons of internal and external growth would be important because you could get questions ranging from AO1, which is a definition question on, define a term internal growth or define a term external growth. Because you're talking about growth, you might also want to think about the BMT, which relates to growth, which is Ansoff matrix. Okay. Perhaps we will be given more information that talks about, how Myt PLC has grown its business over the years. Okay, and you might have to apply the Ansoff matrix to help you explain the opportunities and challenges that these growth methods have brought about for Myt PLC. And you might have to identify these growth methods in relation to the Ansoff matrix as well. Okay, where you have, for example, market penetration, okay, product development, market development, and diversification. Okay. Also looking at the risk, okay, and the rewards, okay, potential rewards from these growth methods. Of course, you will also have to look at, the pros and cons of these methods. This would be relevant for, let's say, a 4-mark question that you might get in the exam, okay, asking you on, for example, explain one advantage and one disadvantage of Myt PLC in its acquisition of, for example, Lots of Coffee, which is one of the companies that they are acquiring, right? The pros and cons in relation to that. So again, be prepared with at least the content aspect of it. So then at least when you get the case study, the entire case study on the day of the exam, then you know how to apply it to the content and the theory of the course. All right. Now, just one more thing to point out here in this one sentence. We can unpack one more thing. It says that Myt has grown in size. Now, this might be a little bit trivial, but if you think very carefully, Myt has grown in size. This would relate to market growth. And market growth is something that you need to know within the SL content. It is part of topic 4.1. And market growth is referring to when the market of the business, of the industry rather, okay, has grown in size, okay, rather than just simply the business, but the entire industry has grown in size. So you might have to take a look at maybe perhaps market growth calculation, because there is an AO4 in terms of market growth calculations. And you might recall earlier I mentioned that even though paper one is a primarily qualitative focused paper, that doesn't rule out that there could be a possibility you might get some simple mathematical calculation, which doesn't require you to use any of the formula from the formula sheet because you are allowed access to a GDC or a calculator for the paper one examination. So again, just be prepared that you might be asked to calculate the market growth of the non-alcoholic beverage or drink industry if you're given those information and the data on the day of the exam. Okay, of course, we don't have it here, but again, we're not ruling out the possibility of that being asked in the exam. So just be prepared. Make sure you know the formula to calculate that. And while you're at it, you might also want to look at, market share. Maybe they will give you some information about Myt PLC's, market share as a non-alcoholic drinks manufacturer in relation to other rivals that are within the industry. So looking at the calculation, but also make sure that you're able to define these two terms as well. Okay. Now, in the second sentence of the second paragraph, it says initially Myt manufactured just one drink, um, which is a root beer. Okay. And the root beer was an non-alcoholic, sweet, and carbonated drink. Okay. So what we see here is that because they've only manufactured one drink, it means that initially their product portfolio, okay, is pretty narrow. Okay. Now, there's good and bad with this because if they only manufacture one drink, it could mean that they have some sort of USP perhaps with the drink. Of course, we don't have sufficient detail to reassure whether or not that is the case. But, think about a business that's only focused on producing one drink. They must have some sort of unique selling point, right? Or something that's special about their product, which differentiate themselves from, other beverage manufacturer when there are many different beverage manufacturers that manufactures many different products within their product portfolio. So one aspect you might look at the USP in relation to the manufacturing of one drink. You might also look at this in terms of, for example, is there a over-reliance on one single product? Because if there is an over-reliance on one single product, this could lead to, a narrowed, okay, revenue stream for Myt PLC. And in this case, it is quite risky, right? In terms of a financial perspective. So that's something to think about as well. Now, the product here is a root beer. Root beer is not an alcoholic drink, although the word beer, it is an alcoholic drink. Root beer is a, sweet carbonated drink for those of you who are not very familiar with this product. Those of you who might be living in North America, you might be familiar with the brand A&W Burgers. Okay, A&W Burgers is very famous in terms of the root beer that they sell with the burgers that they sell at their store. So you might have a better idea of what it is. And then it says by 2020, Myt had developed its own large product portfolio of over 30 different drinks. So this is an important piece of information for us. So they developed a large portfolio of 30 different drinks. Now, this portfolio, okay, large portfolio, I would argue this could possibly be a term that you need to be able to define. So product portfolio, which obviously relates to the product aspect, okay, of these 7 Ps. Now, when you think about the product aspect of the 7Ps, there's a couple of things you need to think about. Okay. Product, you have learned something called the product life cycle. So perhaps you might want to take a look at, or you might be getting questions that relate to the product life cycle of this root beer. Okay. Maybe in the past, this was the only drink that Myt PLC had, produced, but over the years, there's more competitors, and then now Myt cannot just rely on this one single root beer product, and therefore they have to, produce other different drinks. Okay, so looking at the decline of this product, okay, which then you might also want to look at perhaps extension strategy, okay, which Myt PLC might have engaged in. Of course, again, we don't have those information from the case right now. I am being a little bit hypothetical here, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to unpack as much as we can and link it back to, the different topics that we have learned throughout this course, right? So what you notice is as I'm going through the case study with you right now and annotating it with you, you'll see that I have written down certain topic numbers. So one thing I would strongly encourage you to do is as you are annotating the case as well on your own, or if you're thinking about, further topics that could be tested, a good idea is to have the business management syllabus right beside you as you're looking at this case study. And as you're reading every line, right? And even, little words, phrases from the case, from the pre-release statement, try to associate it and link it to the topics and see if you can find that there are topics that you can relate to. Then this would give you a better idea on what you need to focus on as you're preparing for the exam and to help you with your revision routine, your schedule, and the focus. Okay, so the fact that, they have developed a large portfolio of 30 different drinks. This large product portfolio, is it to diversify, risk, for example, okay, of being over reliant on one product. And the fact that they have 30 different drinks, right? What might this mean about, for example, their manufacturing process? Okay. So when you talk about manufacturing, you might have to think about, for example, I'm just going to use a different color here. You might think about it from an operation management perspective. Okay, let's say the operation methods. Okay, that is unit 5.2. Okay. Think about if you want to compare Myt PLC to another non-alcoholic beverage manufacturer that you might be familiar with, such as Coca-Cola, right? Coca-Cola sells a non-alcoholic drink. What is their manufacturing methods, right? What are their operation methods? Okay, if you think about it, they have factories around the world as well. And then all of these factories are, operated in a mass or flow production method. So you might have to think about, for example, understanding and learning a little bit more about the mass and the flow production in terms of its pros and cons, because that could be a 4-marker question that you can expect in the exam, okay, as an example. And it says it sells a large product portfolio of over 30 different drinks, which it sells in bottles and cans. Now, this is also a very important piece of information that you want to pay special attention to. Okay. Now, the fact that they mention bottles and cans, okay, it's very similar to to Coca-Cola, for example, right? You think about Coca-Cola, they sell their Coke in many different packaging. So they have tin can version of Coke. Even the can version has like the standard size. They have the smaller size one, the mini can Coke version, okay, which you might see in some parts of the world. They have the plastic bottle version of it, which you see in vending machines that you buy from. You might also know that in some parts of the country, they sell Coca-Cola in the glass signature bottle that they have. Now, thinking about all of the different ways they package their product, that obviously relates to the product aspect of it. So you might again want to look at the packaging aspect of it. Okay. But you also have to think about if it's bottle related. So that means this could be relating to plastic bottles. Now, what do we know about plastic bottles? Plastic bottles, they are non-environmental, right? They are difficult, okay, when it comes to biodegradable. Now, in the Myt PLC pre-release statement on the second page, so the page right after the cover page, you will see that the IB has given you a list of additional terminology that you as a candidate may need to know. So they said that these terminology include avatar, biodegradable, chain of a business, pressure group, recycling, social media influencer. One of the keywords you see here is biodegradable. So when you think about the word biodegradable, one key thing that you want to think about is really the whole sustainability key concept that underpins our course, right? Now, what we kind of notice with the case studies that the IB has created over since May 2024, is the theme on sustainability has become pretty big. Rightfully so, because you can see a lot of your DP courses now make references to the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, from a business perspective, making money is very important, but there's a lot of people are arguing that businesses should make money in a sustainable manner, right? And sustainability has become a very critical key objective in many, many business organizations around the world, because, of course, the resources that we have on Earth is limited, right? So if we're not very sustainable with the way how we produce products, how we operate businesses, then we no longer have a planet Earth that we can live in, right? That's why you might see, climate change and all of those issues that you might explore, let's say in your DP geography course, if you take that alongside with business. So if you think about it, sustainability is a key concept. But at the same time, in the context of this case study on Myt PLC, if they are a business that operates and produces their products using a lot of plastic bottle, it definitely raises a lot of sustainability concern. And when it comes to sustainability, a couple of key topics that you want to make sure you are familiar with are, for example, is the business are they corporately social responsible? So that's topic 1.3. Okay, you might want to dig deep and also make sure you understand the pros and cons of that. Is a company like My PLC, do they have ethical objectives as well? Okay, so that's also 1.3 that you might want to look at. In terms of their production process and how they source their materials and their supply chain, you might want to look at, are they employing the circular business model as part of its operation? Now, this is a BMT, okay, that you might want to go into a lot more detail, right? So there's a couple of circular business model, okay, that you can explore, such as, resource recovery model, for example. Take a look at those and see which one might be relevant, and just be prepared that you might get a question on this, right? On Myt PLC in relation to that. And just circling back to the early part of this sentence, the fact that Myt PLC has developed its own product portfolio of over 30 different drinks. One of the things that you want to also think about is for a business like Myt with 30 different drinks, there's bound to be some products or some of their drinks that are doing better with a better sales revenue. But there are also drinks or products that they have in their product portfolio that isn't doing very well. So they are kind of like bringing the business down in terms of its sales revenue. Now, if you think about it, this is where you might want to apply the Boston Consulting Group matrix, where the business might need to categorize, okay, its product, okay, because they have so many of these different drinks, okay, that that are within their product portfolio. So again, think about possibly BCG matrix as something that could be relevant for for this case as well, and just be prepared because you might get, for example, hypothetically a 10-marker question on marketing in relation to products, for example, and then you will probably likely need to apply the BCG matrix as one of your BMTs for your analysis. Now, finally, in the last sentence of the second paragraph, it says that Myt uses social media influencer as part of its promotional strategy. Now, social media influencer is one of the additional terminology that it's been listed in this case study. So you do need to have a good idea of what it is. Now, as Gen Z students yourself, you probably have a good idea of what it is. Many of you have social media platforms like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, for example. So these are basically people that, could work in partnership with a company like Myt PLC to sell and advertise their beverage products, okay, through social media, right? So social media itself, this word is actually from, if you think about it, it is from social media marketing. Now, social media marketing is something that we discussed in topic 4.5 on promotion. This topic, if you take a look at the IB syllabus, it is tested at the AO3 level. So that means you can expect possibly an essay question in relation to this. Now, again, we are not given sufficient information on whether or not there are issues or concerns with the use of social media influencer. But what I would recommend you to do is, as you're preparing for the exam, knowing that social media influencer is something that they might expand a little bit more on in the remaining 800 words of this case study, you might want to put some time to study what the pros and cons of using social media marketing as a form of promotional methods for a business, knowing that it is tested all the way up to the AO3 level, which represents the 10-marker essay for the IB exam. Okay. And if you think about it, I always say that with social media, it can, be a hit or a miss for a business organization. It could be a it could be a hit because social media, if done right, and if the product is amazing, and if the social media influencer does portray and say the good things about your products in the correct way, as how you want to present your brand and your business, then of course that is going to go viral, and particularly within your generation the information can be disseminated very, very quickly amongst, your peers. So looking at this particular part, what you can argue is that the social media influencer part, you can be exploring, for example, looking at the target market that Myt PLC has. Okay, so looking at marketing planning, that's topic 4.2. Okay, are the Generation Z really the target market for Myt PLC? Are they the reason why they've decided to use social media influencer? Because they want to target more of that population. But if you think about it, social media could also be a miss for a company like Myt PLC. For example, if the social media influencer says something inappropriate, or they portray the products, okay, the beverage products that Myt PLC has in the inaccurate way, then this creates huge negative backlash and publicity. So you have to also think about the negative word of mouth and publicity that could arise as a result of these social media influencer not portraying the Mite's products in the correct manner, in the correct way. All right. Now, before moving on to the next paragraph, just one more thing I want to touch upon here is you also want to take a look at the importance of um, stakeholders, because in the list of additional terminology, they did mention that pressure group is one of the keywords that you might want to know. Now, pressure group, as you know, this is a type of external stakeholder. Okay? And stakeholder is one of the topics from Unit 1. Okay, it's Unit 1.4. So as you're thinking about, for example, the bottle using plastic bottle issue, right? One thing that you might want to think about is what are the implications when it comes to a business like Myt PLC of this scale where they operate, factories across 6 different continents, producing 30 different drinks, and they are packaging in bottles, plastic bottles, for example. What are the environmental implications that this might have? And with the environmental implication, then of course this is going to give rise to concerns amongst pressure groups, such as environmentalists, who are very cautious about, for example, a company like Myt PLC that is producing plastic waste, okay, to the environment. So this pressure group could be related to environmentalists, for example. So you might have to think about their concerns, okay, and what they are trying to achieve out of what Myt PLC is doing in terms of its operation. So let's keep that in mind because it is a key terminology that you do need to know. I would also highlight this as green because pressure group is a terminology that you can expect in the IB exam. All right. So let's move on to the third paragraph. So in the third paragraph here, it starts talking about obesity and diabetes are 2 health issues that have been linked to drinks, many of which provide the entire recommended daily sugar intake for an adult in a single can. So in other words, this is talking a little bit about perhaps the, external secondary market information on the health of drink and health issues and the obesity concerns when it comes to drinking products that are made by, for example, Myt PLC, because we know that Myt PLC's products, as you can see, they do sell sugary drinks, right? It says their root beer is a non-alcoholic sweet and carbonated drink. So these external secondary market info, right? You might need to take into consideration of this as a contextual information on, okay, the challenges, okay, it creates for Myt PLC. Now, this secondary market research, okay, is referencing to market research, which is on topic 4.4. So make sure you have a good understanding of secondary market research. But at the same time, this would also be related to, for example, the social factor in steeple. So which is a BMT that you should be very, very familiar with, because when we take a look at, obesity and diabetes as health issues, these are also social, trends. Okay, that's happening maybe perhaps the young people where they are drinking a lot of these non-alcoholic sugary drinks, right? And then creating, or leading to more obesity and health issues amongst the younger population, right? And then it says that many of them have been linked to drinks, right? And these drinks, are they, you know, similar to Myt PLC's drinks, right? Or Myt's products? That's something to consider, right? Of which it provided the recommended daily sugar intake for an adult in a single can. So there's obviously adults that we're looking at. Okay, that could be one target market. But because in the case study, they also mentioned that they're using social media influencer, obviously that would appeal more to the younger generation like Gen Z and the millennial groups. Which we don't have sufficient information at the moment, but that's something that we can speculate who the target markets are for Myt PLC. And then it says that, however, the sugar substitutes uh, used in diet drinks have been linked to various health problems as well. So again, this is, telling us that even if the product itself isn't using, sugar, for example, if they use sugar substitutes, they also lead to health problems as well. So this again leads back to that social trend that, I was talking about earlier. Now, take a very similar company like Myt PLC that produces non-alcoholic drinks as an example. With Coca-Cola, as you know, they have the regular Coke, but they also have the Diet Coke. Those of you who have drank Diet Coke, you will know that Diet Coke tastes pretty similar to a regular Coke. But they brand their or they brand the Diet Coke drink as containing zero sugar. But little do you know that the Diet Coke actually uses a chemical that is called aspartame. Okay, so you might want to do a little bit of research on what this is. But if you take a look at aspartame, you know that this one actually does lead to, okay, health issues as well. So, even with Coca-Cola, they have been accused, for using aspartame as a sugar substitute in their Coke diet drinks. That, this is actually not, as healthy as people think, right? In fact, it might be actually even better for you to drink a regular Coke containing real sugar over drinking a Diet Coke drink, which contains aspartame. So again, this paragraph isn't really giving you a lot of information about Myt specifically, but it's sort of giving you the overall landscape of the industry that Myt operates in as a sugary, non-alcoholic carbonated drink manufacturer, right? What are some of the external environment concerns that they need to take a look at? So I would say these are the steeple, okay, factors that should be considered in any decision making by Myt. Okay, made by Myt. And in the last sentence of this third paragraph, it says, Myt drinks are high in caffeine and sugar. So then it's echoing these issues that we were talking about. Okay. So of course, because the fact that it's high in caffeine and high in sugar, there will be obviously concerns amongst the pressure groups that I mentioned earlier, right? You might have to think about, ethical concern. Is it really ethical for a company like Myt, okay, to sell products that are high in concentration of caffeine and sugar, right? And you also have to look at perhaps are they corporately socially responsible in terms of these products that they're producing, but there are now secondary market research that are suggesting, it is not healthy for, people and adults, teenagers and adults to drink these types of drinks. So again, just more of a contextual background information. But again, what I would do is I would do a little bit more research on, let's say, the implications of, companies like, for example, Coke, that produces sugary drinks, right? What are some of the backlashes that these businesses have in relation to pressure groups, in relation to, them achieving ethical objectives, okay, alongside with what I said earlier about how they package their product, which may raise, for example, sustainability concern, looking at, the difficulties and challenges of it being, non-biodegradable, for example. These are things that could come up in that extra 800 words that you might get on the day of the exam. All right. Now, onwards to the last two paragraphs. So next part we have in 2023, Myt's board of director began a process of diversification, taking over. So in this one short line, you'll see that there are three key terms that you need to define or be able to define. So board of director is one of them. Diversification is another. Now, taking over, although it's not an actual BM term, but the fact that you're using the word taking over right here, this is inferring acquisition, okay, which is from topic 1.5 on growth and evolution. Okay. Board of director is obviously in relation to types of business entity. So topic 1.2, specifically, we're looking at publicly held company because only in publicly held companies you will have a board of director. Okay. And what are the roles and responsibilities of, of a board of directors, right? One of the key things that board of directors are responsible for are making sure that they're creating sustainable returns for their shareholders. We know that Myt PLC is a publicly held multinational company, so they do sell shares to investors and they do sell shares to shareholders. So for shareholders, okay, that would be another stakeholder that the board of director needs to sort of make sure they attend to their needs and also creating value to them, right? So you want to create value for them. But this value should be a sustainable return for these shareholders, okay? As we're looking at the decisions that are made by Myt PLC. Now, in terms of process of diversification, so what they're saying is that Myt PLC is engaged in the acquisition of these two companies, Lots of Coffee and Honest Water, in an attempt to pretty much diversify their line of business and their business model to some degree. Now, diversification actually comes from Ansoff Matrix, so that means please familiarize yourself with this BMT on Ansoff Matrix, making sure that you know what diversification means. This is the situation where a business, as part of its growth method, so these are growth methods, you're looking at engaging in a new market, okay, with a new product, for example. And what we know is that with new market and new product, this could be pretty risky, but could reap high returns. So it's like a high risk, high return growth method. Now, what exactly is this new market and new product? If we take a look at the two companies that they have acquired, Lots of Coffee, it says that it is a chain of coffee shops with over 4,000 outlets across 35 countries. So what we see here is this is a pretty extensive and large coffee shop. Now, it's a coffee shop, okay? It's not a manufacturer. So what we see is that that's already different in terms of, what Myt PLC does, because they are a non-alcoholic beverage manufacturer. But here we're talking about a restaurant slash food and beverage industry. Okay. So I would regard lots of coffee as very similar to, for example, maybe Starbucks. Okay. Maybe in the UK, for example, you have Pret a Manger. Okay. As just some examples that you can think about. And these are chain of coffee shops, okay, with over 4,000 outlets in across 35 countries. So it's pretty large, okay? Now, because they are a large company that have many outlets, one thing you might also think about is the organizational structure when it comes to um, the pre-acquisition of lots of coffee and also the post-acquisition of lots of coffee. So how would, Myt PLC integrate lots of coffee as part of its company, as they diversify by taking over this company, right? So are they looking at organizational structure in terms of by geography? Okay. Or is it by, let's say region, product, okay, and so on. Now, this is from topic 2.2, which you might want to go back and, study a little bit on. It is very implied, although it's not explicitly mentioned. But again, we're trying to unpack to as much detail and depth that we can on what could be asked, okay, in the exam. So what I'm saying here is that because they're acquiring a company, then of course they have to think about how they want to organize its company organizational structure, given that Lots of Coffee is now going to be a part of Myt PLC. Okay. Now, another thing to point out here is that if you take a look at the list of additional terminology, one of the key terms they mention is the chain of a business. So in this case, it's a chain of coffee shop. The word chain, okay, implies franchising. And franchising is a growth method that you would have learned in topic 1.5 on growth and evolution. So what I would recommend you to do is maybe take a look at also the pros and cons of franchising as you are studying, the pros and cons of acquisition, because this, okay, could possibly be a 10 marker question. Let's say they ask you, discuss or evaluate, whether or not the acquisition of Lots of Coffee and Honest Water was a good decision for Myt PLC as they are, diversifying its business, for example. Okay. Alternatively, they might ask you a simple question, a four marker that looks at, explain the one advantage and one disadvantage of a company like Lots of Coffee in operating a chain of coffee shops, across a wide, geographical, area, for example, or globally. Then you have to look at the pros and cons in relation to that. All right. The other company that has been acquired by Myt PLC is Honest Water. And what they do is they are a manufacturer of bottled drinking water. Now, what you notice is that this one is in a similar, okay, um, stage of production for Myt PLC because they are both manufacturers. So in this case, it's different because Lots of Coffee is a retailer, right? So this is a retailer where when Myt PLC acquires a retailer like Lots of Coffee that has these coffee shops, this would then perhaps allow them in the future to sell the 30 different drinks that they have in their product portfolio at these stores. So when you think about it, okay, this type of acquisition is a more of a vertical acquisition where you're acquiring a company that is either before or after your stage of production or line of business, right? Whereas Honest Water, it's a manufacturer of bottled drinking water. They also manufacture a beverage, okay? But in this case, it's bottled drinking water, whereas Lots of Coffee has non-alcoholic beverages. So it's a similar stage of production. So this is more of a horizontal, okay, acquisition. Now, the key thing to look at here is the fact is that we're talking about bottled drinking water again. So again, this is raising sustainability concern, okay, in terms of plastic waste. So one sort of possible, maybe perhaps a 10 marker question they ask you is, whether or not, by acquiring Honest Water, okay, which is a manufacturer of bottled drinking water, then is Myt PLC, adding more, challenges to sort of business model right now, which is them all producing these non-alcoholic beverages in bottles and cans, right? So are they going to be accused, okay, with further backlash of, producing more products, more beverage products that are using plastic waste, okay? So that's something not to consider, okay? And maybe perhaps, we have to think about this, okay, and the implications of that. All right. And if you take a look at the final paragraph, it says they announce plans. So here's pretty important because these plans, I would say, are hints, okay, on possible 10 marker scenarios. So each one of them, you will have to make sure that you have some sort of preparation that they might expand further on these different plans, okay, and give you details, and then they might ask you that as a 10 marker question. So let's look at them one by one so we can unpack them and think about, what they could ask you. So the first one is their first plan is possibly to modernize and make its factories green. So think about, what I said earlier about the way how they produce their, 30 different drinks, the fact that they are producing products that are, considered not healthy, okay? They do lead to health problems. The fact that they do package their products using bottles and cans, the fact that Myt PLC has 30 different, drinks under their product portfolio, okay? And consider that the scale of their business, okay? They have factories across 6 different continents. We're talking about a very, very large beverage manufacturing company, right? And the fact that they have taken over Honest Water, which is a manufacturer of bottled drinking water, it means that the extent and degree in their environmental impact by producing more of these plastic wastes, okay, is pretty big, pretty extensive too. So perhaps you might be asked a question, should, this company decide to Myt PLC modernize and make its factory green. Now, if you think about this, right, making a factory green and modernizing it, this relates to obviously, corporate social responsibility. This also relates to addressing sustainability concern, which I talked about earlier. Okay. This also relates to perhaps, meeting ethical, okay, objectives of the business, for example. All right. At the same time, if you think about it, a business of their size and scale, if they were going to modernize and make its factories green, this means that there's going to be significant capital expenditure. Okay. Now, capital expenditure is something that you would have learned in topic 3.1, okay, which is the introduction of finance. Now, remember this case study, or paper 1 rather, you won't be getting a formula sheet, but you're given a calculator. So my guess here is that perhaps if they're gonna, talk more about this modernization and making its factories green, what could happen is you might be given perhaps investment appraisal results, which you might need to use, okay, in relation to, let's say, payback period or ARR. And then they might ask you to evaluate, okay, whether or not, Myt PLC, given the contextual information about, sustainability impacts that they have, like negative sustainability impact, obviously, that they have on the environment with the way how they produce their products, right? Should they modernize? Would you recommend them to modernize and make its factories green? And then they give you these investment appraisal results, which you need to be able to interpret, right? You might also be given maybe a decision tree, okay, in relation to this as well. So the possibilities are quite endless. So please make sure that we are prepared, okay, to do some calculation. The IB has in the past, especially in the old syllabus paper 1, what they have done is they've given students a decision tree that is incompleted. So it is the student's job to complete the decision tree by calculating the net expected returns for one of the options, right? So this could be the case as well if, they're giving you the more quantitative aspects in sort of testing you on, your ability to give recommended sound business recommendation on if they should make the factory green, right? You should also think about, because we're talking about factory greens, right? Being green, you might have to look at the circular business model as well, okay, as part of this. All right. So the next announced plan that they have is perhaps they should explore entering the healthy snack market. Okay, so this one I'm going to use orange to make it easier for us to annotate. Now, if you take a look at healthy snacks market, this would then deviate from what Myt PLC is good at doing, which is the manufacturing of beverages, right? Specifically non-alcoholic beverages. Healthy snacks market. What's good about this is obviously it could help shift the perception of Myt PLC being a company that produces, um, you know, products or beverages that are considered as unhealthy or raises health concerns, right? So from a marketing perspective, maybe it's good with branding, but from a strategy perspective, you have to think about the risk. You have to think about the investments that needs to be made. You have to also think about, well, even from the marketing perspective, the research that you need to do in order to see if there is indeed a need or a market on healthy snacks, right? Now, think about the target market that they're trying to appeal to. Gen Zs. Are they now more into the health, aspect of things, right? Now, just generally speaking, right, Generation Z does have a greater awareness of, of caring for themselves and also for, health, right, and fitness. So maybe, entering into the health snacks market could help them appeal to a different target market or perhaps a new target market, that Myt PLC wants to target, right? So that's something that you want to think about. And of course, from a finance perspective, you might want to think about perhaps do they have the sufficient liquidity, okay, to do this as well. So in order to help you with understanding more about this, I would encourage you to take a look at maybe do some research on what are considered as healthy snacks. Maybe take a look at, for example, the growth rates of the healthy snack market in the world. You might want to take a look at sources like Statista. They will give you information on that. Or, try YouTubing certain videos on, the growth of health snacks market, in the world. Just do a quick search like that on the YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure you'll be able to find some videos that would give you a little bit more insights, contextual information on the industry. Doesn't necessarily mean it relates exactly to Myt PLC, but given the context, you have some idea, what this is. So when you go into the exam and you read the remaining 800 words, then you can sort of, oh, you might recall that, oh, I remember watching that video which talked about the healthy snack market, and then it's very similar to what's going on in the case. Then it can help you with your application skill when you answer, the more difficult questions like the 4 marker, 6 marker, and the 10 marker questions, which all really requires you to demonstrate application. All right. The third plan that you can see here is that they are planning to utilize computer-generated avatars when creating advertisement. Now, avatars is a word that you need to understand and you need to be able to, interpret. Doesn't mean that you have to define what this is, but you have a good understanding of what avatars are, right? Avatars are basically like a fake profile, okay? You can create an avatar yourself as well, but what this fake profile would be important in the context of Myt PLC, especially when we're talking about creating advertisement, is these fake profile might allow the business to construct something called a consumer profile. So it's kind of like an ideal profile of what the target market could be for Myt PLC as they decide to sell their product to a particular market. So what they're doing is they're looking at the use of technology, okay, in this case, and how this technology plays a role when it comes to perhaps creating these consumer profiles that can help support the advertising aspect of Myt PLC, which relates to promotions. Okay, and promotions is obviously the 7 Ps in 4.5 that you need to think about. So we're looking at, in this case, perhaps the segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Okay, especially if, for example, Myt PLC wants to, for example, enter the healthy snack markets. They might want to make use of these avatars to help them create these promotions because they're entering a completely new market, which they're not very familiar with, right? Likewise, they've acquired Lots of Coffee, which is a chain of coffee shops, right? They haven't been in the business of of running a restaurant, okay, or like a small cafe type of business, for example, then perhaps, they might want to use avatars to help them with the promotional aspect of their business. And then lastly, you can see that they're doing this to reduce caffeine and sugar levels in its products. So this is already implying that there is currently a concern in relation to this, particularly given the secondary market information that we have right here, that you could use, okay, to help you with the depth of your analysis later on. Okay. And then they said that okay, to improve corporate social responsibility. So perhaps they are getting backlash on this. Okay. So you want to think about, okay, are they encountering backlash on this? Okay. What defines really ethical objectives for Myt PLC as well. Okay, this is under topic 1.3 that you want to look at. And just to put it out there that CSR is a very common 10 marker question that the IB loves to ask. So I would really recommend you to make sure you have a good idea of what it is, the pros and cons of CSR, right? And then of course, looking at how that could then relate more specifically to Myt PLC. All right. So this is sort of our version, our interpretation of Myt PLC's pre-release statement. Of course, your teacher might have a slightly different interpretation of what it is, but we try to unpack as many things as we can through this annotation exercise to help you understand what you need to look for and how you can sort of think about what are the topics that might be of interest and importance as you're preparing for this examination. All right. Now, in the next couple of slides here, we're now going to take a higher level approach on how these 200 words pre-release statement can be connected to the 5 different business functions you have learned through the business management course. So I'll give you a second just to have a quick look at this so you have a better understanding what to expect. So what you see here is that we have basically separated some of the key things that we looked at in the annotation, but organize it now into the 5 units that you have learned. So in unit 1, it's on business strategy. So one of the things that you might want to pay a bit more attention to is looking at the benefits and the costs of operating a multinational beverage manufacturer like Myt PLC. So you might look at, for example, things like their supply chain, for example, right? That would be important. Looking at how, they distribute their products, for example. Now, this might not be specifically related to Unit 1 because distribution is more of a marketing issue, but it's, again, business is very intertwined in terms of the content that you learn. So this is something, you might want to make that connection if, let's say, you get a question on this. You might also want to look at, like I said earlier, opportunities and challenges for business like Myt growing externally and internally. We know from the case study so far, there are evidence of Myt PLC growing externally through the acquisition of Lots of Coffee, which is a chain of coffee store shop. And then you also have Honest Water, which is a bottled water manufacturer. So those are external acquisitions, external growth methods, and then looking at how this might influence, their decisions to grow even further, and also maybe looking at decisions on how they can revamp the way how they run their factories by modernizing it and then turning it more into a green factory, as you can see in the last paragraph of the pre-release. We know that from the case study so far, there are quite a lot of steeple information that we can make use of, specifically when they were talking about the trends on, obesity and health issues arising from drinking sugary drinks. You might also want to look at, the SWOT analysis uh, of Myt PLC, right, as a business so far. So these are things that could affect their decisions and their operations, okay, as a business. And in here you can see we have 3 different questions that could be asked in the exam. Again, these are sample questions. You can have a go at them. We created them based on the pre-release case or the statements that we have so far. And don't forget that we do have a mock exam on our Diplomaly website that you can, you can try and have a go at. And for that one, you will see the full paper with full mark schemes that will help you debrief as you try and prepare for a practice round writing a full paper one as part of your revision schedule. Now, in terms of the HR unit, we also looked at from the case study so far, there are some concerns and impacts on possible workforce planning when it comes to their acquisition of these two companies. So lots of coffee and honest water. So looking at, are there need to, make certain employees redundant, particularly with honest water. They are also in the business of manufacturing beverages, just out there manufacturing drink bottled water, right? But lots of coffee is a bit different. Okay, they run a chain of coffee shop, right? So the skill sets that the employees and the factory workers at Myt PLC might not be completely transferable to lots of coffee. So how would they then plan for that workforce? That's something to think about. Okay. In terms of the HR impact, they have the decision to modernize its factories, right? So when, Myt PLC, let's say they do decide on modernizing the factory, what kind of training do they need to give the employees to make sure that they understand what green factories mean? Okay, and the different procedures and processes to make sure that they are producing their beverages and their products in a green way, right? So then it's sustainable. How do we also keep them motivated, right? If you think about it, factory workers tend to be just motivated by more so by money, right? So that's when you might want to apply some motivation theories like Taylor's scientific theory, where, he believed that people are generally motivated by money. So if you have a workforce at Myt who's already, motivated in that respect, and then you're telling them that, hey, we're going to modernize our factory to become green factory, and then you have to then get retrained and learn new skills. Now, what kind of motivation implication will this have on employees? Again, that's something for you to think about, okay, and something that you might want to, be prepared, okay, if let's say you do get something like that in the exam, okay, where you might have to integrate motivation theory as part of your response. Lastly, we also know that there were acquisitions from the pre-release. So then, is this going to affect the organizational structure? So I briefly mentioned that as well when we were annotating the case. So you might want to go back and have a look at that. So here are some exemplar questions that you can take a look at, which ranges from 2 markers to 4 marker questions that you can expect in the exam. With the final accounts, okay, they talked about, many of these new initiatives and plans, right? One being the modernization and trying to create, these green factories, right? This is where you might have to think about possible investment appraisal, understanding and interpretation of the results, okay, looking at possible quantitative factors and also the non-quantitative factors that should be considered in a decision like that. Let's say if the 10 marker was asking you on, should they, convert and modernize their, factories to become green factories, for example. Okay. Of course, to support that, you will have to look at the financial position and the financial performance of the business. So maybe you could be given, let's say, ratios, right? And then you have to sort of interpret the ratios, okay? Interpret and use ratios to assess the quantitative aspects of the decision making. You might have to look at the sources of finance to support their different proposed plans, right? You got a couple, right? You got the modernization of the factories. That's an area where they might have to get some sources of finance. You might have to look at, for example, their decision to expand and grow into the healthy snack market. That would then also require some level of sources of finance. Remember, they are a privately held multinational company. So as a privately held multinational company, what are some of the sources of finance that are available for them, right? So that's something, again, to consider, okay, as you're looking at preparing the finance aspect of this case study. And again, there are 3 exemplar questions that you can have a look at. In terms of marketing, I think we went through this quite extensively in the annotation. So segmentation, targeting, and positioning in determining the market segment and the target market for its product portfolio, right? And perhaps the use of avatar to help them with the segmentation process in building the consumer profile that allows them then to focus their marketing efforts on the target market that they want to sell to. Right? Looking at perhaps using market research data, okay, which we are presented in the case study so far, right, and how that might then affect them in building a more diversified beverage product portfolio, right? The case was also very explicit when it comes to talking about social media marketing, right? So be sure that you study social media marketing and make sure you study it to the depth of your ability to write a 10 marker essay on this, and also looking at, other promotional methods that could be used. So social media marketing is only one aspect of promotion, but there's also above the line promotion, right? There's below the line promotion that you have learned, and then there's also through the line promotion that you have learned, okay, in the promotional aspect of the 7Ps within marketing. And again, here are some exemplar questions that you can have a look at. And finally, in Unit 5, they talked about, these factories that they are planning to modernize, right? And the fact that Myt PLC has factories across 6 different continents, and then they're also acquiring lots of coffee with operations in many different countries. That really relates to location analysis. So make sure that you understand, possible qualitative and quantitative factors that are useful in determining the appropriate location for their manufacturing factories, okay, or even opening new shops for lots of coffee as well. Okay. Now, although you're not given this information in the case study right now, but they did talk about their plans to perhaps expand into the healthy snack market. What they could do in the exam is they could give you some, pricing information, cost information about, their expansion into the healthy snacks market. And what they might ask you to do is they might ask you to perform some break-even calculation. And then you might need to use that information to help support your rationale on whether or not, it's a good idea for them to expand into the new healthy snacks product line, as an example. Okay, so again, don't assume that there's no calculation. There could be some calculations that could be tested in your paper 1 because you are allowed a calculator for this examination. You're just not allowed access to a formula sheet. So anything that you have learned that is not on the formula sheet, but it is math related, be prepared that you might need to perform calculations on those. Okay. And finally, the fact that they talked about this green factory, right, that's being proposed and trying to modernize, that could then, impact the way how they operate their business and, their production methods as well. So that could be, possible 6 marker, 4 marker, or even a 10 marker question that you could get in the exam. All right. So hopefully this helps give you a snapshot of, how the analysis and the annotations we did kind of complements with, the different topics that you have learned throughout the 5 units in this course. Now here is just a business model analysis for that we performed here for Myt PLC as a non-alcoholic drinks manufacturer. So feel free to pause the video to to take a look at this. What we've done here is we looked at Myt PLC as a non-alcoholic drinks manufacturer, who their key stakeholders are, why is it important. We looked at, for example, the revenues and costs, okay, in their business model. So then you have an idea of what you can expect from the financial aspect. From the marketing aspects, we looked at, for example, the customer and the marketing mix. So who might they be trying to targeting with their current business model as a non-alcoholic drinks manufacturer? And finally, what are some, plans and decisions that they're making in terms of their growth? So feel free to pause the video now to have a look at this. And then on this next slide, we have also a business model analysis, but now as a multinational company for Myt PLC, because we know that they have engaged in these acquisition plans on Lots of Coffee and also Honest Water. So again, take a look at these key stakeholders, why they might be important, and how you might use these key stakeholders, okay, as part of your analysis on the impact on these stakeholders in, let's say, your 6 marker, 4 marker, and also the 10 marker essay question. Okay, same goes for the revenues and costs, and then the key activities that you might want to pay a bit more special attention to. Okay, and again, just wanted to let you know that on the Diplomaly website, we do have mock exams, okay, on Myt PLC that you can practice to help you sort of solidify and consolidate your understanding of the content in relation to, the case study itself. And finally, we've also provided you with the the definitions or aspects that you need to consider for the additional key terms that were presented to you in the Myt PLC pre-release pre-release statement. So we have avatar, okay, we have biodegradable, we have chain of a business. So take a look at these. Obviously, I wouldn't expect the IB to be testing you on avatar, biodegradable, or even chain of a business. But if you take a look at the next three additional terms that they have mentioned, recycling, social media influencer, and pressure group, I don't think recycling will be tested, but of course, have a good idea of why recycling is important in the context of Myt, PLC's packaging using plastic bottles and also the tin cans. Um, in terms of social media influencer, I do think that there could be a possibility you might need to be able to define what social media marketing is, because that is a key term in the course. And pressure group is also a key BM term in the course, which is under Unit 1.4 on stakeholders. Pressure group is an example of an external stakeholder group that has an impact on the decisions that are made by Myt PLC. All right. So not all of these terms you are expected to define, but make sure that you do have a good knowledge of what they are, because you might end up using these terminologies as part of your analysis when you respond to the questions in the exam. All right. So we hope that this video was helpful for you as a May 2025 candidate writing the IB Business Management Paper 1 exam. We understand that it is very stressful, and as you're preparing for these exams, and for many of you, BM is probably one of the first IB exam you will be writing in this upcoming May exam schedule. So we really hope that this video has given you some further insights and things to think about on what you need to study and how to best prepare for yourself for paper 1. Now, if you're looking for extra resources for your paper 1 examination on Myt PLC, please don't hesitate to check out our mock exams on our Diplomaly website for more practices. We do have full mark scheme with exemplar responses that you can take advantage of. And of course, if you want more personalized one-to-one support, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Our email is info@diplomaly.org. And we also have a WhatsApp number that you can come and contact us, or you can visit our website at www.diplomaly.org for our comprehensive collection of resources to help you get top marks in this course. If you found this video helpful, please do like the video and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching this, and best of luck in your upcoming IB final exam.